Welcome to the audio program for The Complete Guide to the Toefl Test, IBT Edition, by Bruce Rogers. Copyright 2007 by Thomson ELT, a part of the Thomson Corporation, Boston, Massachusetts. All rights reserved. Exercise 9.2.
Listen to a lecture in a dance class.
Okay, today we're talking a bit about recording choreography. Let me start with a question for you. Do you know what steps dancers use during the first productions of Swan Lake, or for that matter, any of the most famous ballets? That's really a trick question because, well, in most cases, no one knows, not really. Believe it or not, no written choreography exists for the early performances of most of the world's most famous classical ballets, or for that matter, even for a lot of modern ballet. So, how did choreographers teach dancers how to perform their dances? Mostly, they demonstrated the steps themselves, or they had one of the dancers model the steps for the other dancers. Sure, systems of written choreography have been around for a long while. Some systems use numbers, some use abstract symbols, some use letters and words. Oh, and musical notation. Some systems use musical notes. The two most common systems in use are called Laban notation and the Benesch system. Benesch movement notation, it's called. But here's the thing. Choreographers don't use these systems all that often. Why not, you ask? Well, because of the time it takes. Because recording three-dimensional dance movements, it's very difficult, very complex, and especially it's very time-consuming. A single minute of dance can take up to maybe 6 hours to get down on paper. You can imagine how long recording an entire ballet would take. And choreographers tend to be very busy people. But computer experts came to the choreographer's rescue. Computers have been used since the 60s to record choreography. The first one I know about anyway, was a program written by Michael Knoll. And it was, I guess by today's standards, you'd say it was pretty primitive. The dancers looked like stick figures on a child's drawing, but since the 1980s, sophisticated programs have been around. Programs that, they let choreographers record the dancers' steps and movements quite easily. The only problem with these software programs, was that they required very powerful computers to run them. And as you no doubt know, not all dance companies have the kind of money you need to buy a mainframe computer. But because personal computers now have more memory, more power, now you can choreograph a whole ballet on a good laptop. Oh, and I meant to mention earlier, we owe a lot of the credit for these improvements in the software for dance choreography to the space program. Back in the 60s and 70s, engineers at NASA needed computerized models, three-dimensional, moving models of astronauts' bodies so that the engineers could design spacesuits and spacecraft. And it turned out that the models they designed could be adapted quite nicely to dancers' bodies. So anyway, I've reserved the computer lab down the hall for the rest of this class. We're going to spend the rest of our time today playing around with some of this choreography software, okay? So let's walk over there.
Now get ready to answer the question. You may use your notes to help you. Question 1. What is the main point of this lecture? Listen to a discussion in a psychology class.
Excuse me, Professor Mitchie, but I'm a little confused about what you just said.
You're confused? Why is that, Deborah?
Well, you said that that most scientists don't think that ESP really exists.
Okay, now you're clear what I'm talking about when I say ESP.
It's mind reading. That kind of stuff. Extrasensory perception.
Well, that's a pretty good definition. It can be telepathy, that's communicating mind to mind, or telekinesis, that's moving things with your mind, precognition, which is knowing the future or seeing the future, other phenomena too. And the study of ESP is sometimes called parapsychology.
But you think all that is nonsense, I guess, right?
Now, I'm not saying there aren't people who have, remarkable senses of intuition. But I think that's because they're just very sensitive, very tuned into their environments, to the people around them. I don't think they have any abnormal mental powers beyond that, no.
Well, I was just reading an article about ESP, and it said that there were scientific experiments done at some university. I don't remember where, but the experiments were done with cards, and that they proved that some people could read minds.
She's probably thinking of those experiments at Duke University.
Right. It was at Duke.
Well, yes, there were a series of experiments at Duke about 70 years ago. Professor J.P. Rhine, who was, interestingly enough, a botanist, not a psychologist, he founded the Department of Parapsychology at Duke, and he and his wife did a lot of experiments, especially involving telepathy.
He used those cards, didn't he? The ones with, stars and crosses?
Yes, well, at first he used ordinary playing cards, but then he started using a deck of 25 cards. There were 5 symbols on these cards: a star, a cross, some wavy lines, a circle, and maybe a square.
So, how do the experiments work?
Well, basically it went like this. One person turned over the card and looked at it carefully, really trying to focus on it, to picture it in his mind. This person was called the sender. The other person, called the percipient, had to guess what symbol the sender was looking at. So, if it was just a matter of chance guessing, how many times should the percipient guess correctly?
5, I guess. I mean, since there are 5 types of symbols and
25 cards, yes, that's right. The law of averages says that you should get 20% right, even if you have absolutely no ESP talent. So if someone, and they tested thousands of people at their lab, if someone on average got more than 20%, they'd get tested more, and some of these individuals went on to get remarkably high scores.
So, doesn't this prove that some people that they have powers?
Well, after Rhine did his experiments at Duke, a lot of similar experiments have been done at Stanford University, in Scotland, and elsewhere, and the conclusion, most researchers have decided that Rhine's results were, I guess the kindest word I could use is questionable. More recent experiments have been done under more carefully controlled conditions, and those remarkable results, those really high scores that Rhine got, have been rare, practically non-existent. And in science, the trend should be the opposite.
What do you mean, Professor?
Well, if the phenomenon you're studying is real, and the experiments are improved, are more reliable, then the results you get should be more certain, not less certain.
So that's why you don't believe in ESP.
To put it in a nutshell, I've just never seen any experimental proof for ESP that stood up to careful examination.
Now get ready to answer the question. You may use your notes to help you. Question 2. What are the speakers mainly discussing? Listen to a lecture in an archaeology class.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Robert Wolf, and I'm past president of the State Archaeological Society. I'd like to thank Professor Kingsley for asking me to come in and talk to you all about a subject I'm pretty passionate about: shipwrecks. You see, I'm also a diver, and I'm a member of the International Underwater Archaeology Society, and I've been on a lot of underwater expeditions to investigate shipwrecks. A lot of times, when someone mentions shipwrecks, you think of pirates and treasures buried under the sea. And in reality, many divers, the ones we call treasure hunters, do try to find shipwrecks with valuables still aboard them. In fact, that's one of the problems we face in this field. Some shipwrecks have literally been torn apart by treasure hunters searching for gold coins or jewelry, even if there wasn't any there, and underwater archaeologists weren't able to get much information from these ships. But shipwrecks they can be a lot more than just places to look for treasure. A shipwreck is a time capsule, if you know what I mean. A photograph, a snapshot of what life was like at the moment the ship sank. And unlike sites on land, a shipwreck, it's uncontaminated. It's not disturbed by the generations of people who live on the site later. Unless, of course, treasure hunters or someone like that has gotten there first. And so they're valuable tools for archaeologists, for historians. For example, the world's oldest known shipwreck. It sank in about 1400 BC off the coast of Turkey. The artifacts on that ship completely changed the way we think of Bronze Age civilizations in the Mediterranean. So I'm mostly going to stick to shipwrecks that occurred here, that happened off the coast of New England. And I'm going to talk about what we learned from them, what archaeologists have learned from them. There have been plenty of shipwrecks in this area. Over the years, fog and storms and rocks and accidents and sometimes even war have sunk a lot of ships around New England. I'm going to be showing you some slides of shipwrecks from trading ships that sank in colonial days, in the 1600s, to the Andrea Doria, which went down in the 1950s. The Andrea Doria, I suppose that's the most famous shipwreck in the area. The Italian ocean liner, the Andrea Doria, and it's a deep, dangerous dive to get to it, I'll tell you. Oh, and after that, we're going to play a little game. I'm going to show you some slides of artifacts that were found on board shipwrecks. Show them just the way they looked when they were found, and you have to guess what they are.
Now get ready to answer the question. You may use your notes to help you. Question 3. What does this lecture mainly concern? Listen to a discussion in an economics class.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I trust everyone had a good weekend and that you managed to read Chapter 7 on taxation. Friday, we talked about the difference between progressive and regressive taxes. And today we're going to talk about two other types of taxation, direct and indirect. What did the text say about direct taxation? Yes, Troy?
Well, the book, according to the chapter that we read, it's, that's when the person who's being taxed.
Well, it could be a person or it could be an organization.
Right, the person or organization who's being taxed pays the government directly. Is that it?
That's great. Now, can you provide an example for us?
Yeah, how about income tax?
Why would you consider income tax a form of direct taxation?
Well, because, the person who earns the income pays the taxes directly to the government, right?
Yes, good, Troy. Okay, so someone else. What is indirect taxation? Cheryl?
Well, if I understand the book correctly, it's when the cost of taxation is paid by someone other than the person or organization that is responsible for paying the taxes.
I'd say you understood the book perfectly. That's a good definition. Now, Cheryl, we need an example of indirect taxation.
Okay, let's see. What if some company brings, say, perfume into the country from France? And let's say there's an import tax on the perfume that the government collects from the company. And then, well, the importer just turns around and charges customers more money for the perfume just to pay the import tax.
Good example. Anyone think of another one?
How about this? Last year, my landlady raised my rent, and when I asked her why, she said it was because the city raised her property taxes. Is that an example?
It certainly is. Yes, Cheryl. You have a question?
Yes, Professor. What about sales taxes, direct or indirect?
Good question. I'm going to let you all think about it for just a minute. Talk it over with the person sitting next to you, if you want. And then you're going to tell me.
Now get ready to answer the question. You may use your notes to help you. Question 4. What is the main purpose of this discussion? Listen to a discussion in an art class.
Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be showing you some slides of, well, I'm just going to project a slide on the screen and see if you can tell me who the artist is and what the name of the painting is. This is his most famous painting. Here we go. Anyone know?
Yeah, I've seen that painting before. I don't remember the name of the artist, but I think the painting is called Nighthawks at the Diner?
Yeah, well, a lot of people call it that, but the real name of the painting is just Nighthawks. Anyone know the artist? Anyone? No? The painter is Edward Hopper. Now, tell me, what sort of reaction do you have when you see it?
It's kind of lonely, kind of depressing, and bleak. It's so dark outside, and inside there are these bright lights, but they're kind of harsh, the lights are, and the people in the diner seem, well, to me, they look really lonely.
A lot of Hopper's works show loneliness, isolation. He was a very realistic painter. One of the reasons he was so realistic, maybe, is that he started off as an illustrator, a commercial artist. And you know, of course, a commercial artist has to be able to paint and draw realistically. In fact, Hopper spent most of his early career doing illustrations and just traveling around. He didn't develop his characteristic style, his mature style, until, I'd say, not until he was in his 40s or maybe 50s. Anyway, most of his paintings show empty city streets, country roads, railroad tracks. There are paintings of storefronts, restaurants, and let me show you another. This is the first one of his mature paintings, and the first one that really made him famous. It's called The House by the Railroad. It's pretty bleak, too, isn't it? You'll notice as we look at more slides that, there aren't many people in the paintings. And the ones that you do see, they look, you could almost say, impersonal, melancholy. That's the mood he tried to convey. Wait, let me back up just a second. He, Hopper, always said he was just painting what he saw, that he wasn't trying to show isolation and loneliness, but one look at his paintings tells you he wasn't being completely honest about this.
Some of these paintings remind me of those old black and white movies from, like, the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, I agree. That type of movie, that style of movie making, is called film noir. And yeah, it does have that same feel, doesn't it? And it's interesting that you should say that, because Hopper did have an influence on some movie makers. On the other hand, he did not have much of an influence on his own generation of painters. Nobody else painted the way Hopper did, at least not until the photorealistic painters in the 60s and 70s. But his contemporaries weren't interested in realism. They were, we'll see some of their works next week when we talk about abstract expressionism.
Now get ready to answer the question. You may use your notes to help you. Question 5. What is the main topic of this discussion? Listen to a discussion in an advertising class.
Morning, class. In our last class, we were talking about regulation in the advertising industry. In fact, you may remember I said that in the United States, in some European countries too, advertising is one of the most heavily regulated industries there is. What example did I give of regulation, government regulation of advertising?
Well, you gave the example of that the United States banned cigarette advertising back in the 1960s.
The early 1970s, actually. That's right. Up until then, tobacco companies and their advertising agencies would portray smoking as part of this carefree, this so glamorous lifestyle. And then it came out in these scientific studies done by the government that tobacco smoking was really dangerous, really unsafe. And so, no more tobacco advertisements. At least not on television or radio. You could still advertise in magazines, on billboards, and so on for a long time after that. Don't ask me why, but you could. And some studies show that the studies seem to indicate that the advertising ban. Oh, and I might mention there was also negative advertising by the government and anti-smoking groups telling people not to smoke. Anyway, these studies show that the use of tobacco actually went down. Okay, there were also some examples in the article I asked you to read for today. Other examples of government regulation?
There was the example from Sweden about how Sweden completely banned advertisements for children.
Right, for children under 12. That happened back in 1991. Now, not to get too far off track here, but since that article was written, there was a European Court of Justice ruling, and it said that Sweden still has to accept that it has no control over advertisements that target Swedish children, advertisements that come from neighboring countries or from satellite. So this undercuts to a certain extent what the Swedes were trying to do, but still, you can see their intent to protect their children from the effects of advertising.
Don't you think that law was a little extreme, maybe?
In my opinion, as a matter of fact, yes, I do. Personally, I think advertisements meant for children should be controlled, maybe controlled more carefully than at present, but not necessarily eliminated. And speaking for myself still, I think they should be controlled by a combination of government regulation and self-regulation. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Sometimes self-regulation works well enough, but if the idea of self-regulation is to create nothing but honest advertisements that are in good taste, well, you only have to turn on your TV and you'll see that this system of self-regulation has its faults, right?
Now get ready to answer the question. You may use your notes to help you. Question 6. What is the class mainly discussing? Listen to a lecture in a world literature class.
So, for the rest of the class today, we're going to talk about the two most important poems, epic poems, in Greek literature. And really not just in Greek literature, but in any literature, anywhere in the world. These are the Iliad and the Odyssey, written by the blind Greek poet Homer. At least we think he was blind. Now, if you happen to have a copy of the syllabus that I gave you last week, you'll notice that we're not going to be able to. We just don't have time to read all of these two poems and talk about them. An epic poem, I probably don't have to tell you this, is a narrative poem, a really long narrative poem. So we're going to read a few passages from the Iliad, and we'll read a bit more from the Odyssey. What I want to talk about today are some of the ways these two long poems, especially their main characters, how they're different. Some people have said that the Iliad is the world's greatest war story, and the Odyssey that it's the world's greatest travel story. The Iliad tells about the Trojan War, the war between Troy and the various Greek kingdoms. The Odyssey tells about a Greek warrior's trip home and all the amazing adventures he has on the way. And he has some wild ones, too. The warrior's name is Odysseus, hence the name for the poem. I think the reason that I prefer the Odyssey to the Iliad myself is that, well, I guess you could say I just like the main character of the Odyssey better than the main characters of the Iliad. As I said, the Iliad is the story of the Trojan War and about the clash, the personality conflict between the main characters. The conflict isn't just between warriors from either side. A lot of the story deals with an argument between the two strongest Greek warriors, Achilles and Agamemnon. Anyway, the main characters in the Iliad, they're strong, they're great warriors, but they're not as clever, not as smart as Odysseus. He's the one who thinks up the plan to end the war after 10 long years and defeat the Trojans. He's the mastermind behind the scheme to build the Trojan horse. You probably know something about that already. The Trojan horse has been in lots of movies and so on. Anyway, he helps end the 10-year war, and then he sets off for home and his family. It takes him another 10 years to get home, where his wife has been waiting faithfully for him for 20 years. But like I said, he has plenty of adventures on the way. Oh, and the other thing about Odysseus that I like is that, well, the characters in the Iliad are pretty static. You know what I mean? They don't change much. This is true of most of Homer's characters, in fact, but it's not true of Odysseus. During the course of the epic, on account of the long war and all the bizarre experiences he has on the way home, he changes. He evolves as a character, just like characters in most modern novels do. Okay then, before we go on, does anyone have any comments? Comments or questions?
Now get ready to answer the question. You may use your notes to help you. Question 7. What is the main point of this lecture? Listen to a lecture in a modern history class.
All right, then. I want to talk about the founding of the United Nations. But before I do, I want to just mention the League of Nations, which was the predecessor of the United Nations. Last week, we talked about the end of the First World War. It ended in 1918, if you remember. Well, right after the war, several leaders of the countries that had won the war, including Wilson of the United States and Lloyd George of Britain, Clemenceau of France, and Jan Smuts of South Africa, and, well, there were others, too. They recognized the need for an international organization, an organization to keep the peace. So when the agreement that ended the war, the Treaty of Versailles, it was called, was signed, it included a provision that included formation of the League of Nations. Its headquarters were in Geneva, Switzerland. But the problem with the League from the beginning was that some of the most powerful nations of the time never joined. As I said, the main drive, the main impetus for forming the League came from Woodrow Wilson, President of the United States. But during the 1920s, the United States went through a period of isolationism. In other words, it just basically withdrew from international affairs. Wilson worked and worked to get the U.S. Senate to agree to join the League, but he never could. Other powerful nations joined, but then quit or were kicked out. This included Brazil, Japan, Germany, the Soviet Union. The other problem was, the League of Nations never had any power, really. No power to enforce its decisions. It had no armed forces. It could only apply economic sanctions, boycotts, and these were pretty easy to get around. The League of Nations did have a few successes early on. It helped prevent wars between Bulgaria and Greece, Iraq and Turkey, and Poland and Lithuania in the 1920s. And the League also had some success in refugee work and famine relief and so on. Oh, and it brokered some deals, some treaties to get countries to reduce the size of their navies. But the League was totally powerless to stop the buildup to the Second World War in the 1930s. So, during the war, During World War II, I mean. The League didn't meet. Then after the war, it was replaced by the United Nations, which, of course, was headquartered in New York City. Still, the League of Nations was, I think it served an important role. It developed a new model of internationalism. In the late 19th and early 20th century, internationalism really just meant alliances of powerful nations, and these alliances often dragged other countries into conflict. That's what happened, really. That's what led to World War I. But the League was at least an attempt to bring all the nations of the world together to work for peace. True, it didn't work, not really, but at least there was an effort made. Oh, and another thing I meant to add, the structure of the League of Nations, the administrative structure, the government, if you will, was very similar to that of the United Nations. The Secretary-General, the Secretariat, the General Assembly, the Security Council, these are all fixtures of the United Nations that came from the League of Nations. Okay, we're going to have to wait until next class to discuss the United Nations, but I just wanted you to be aware of the League of Nations because of its role, its place in history, which I think has often been misunderstood.
Now get ready to answer the question. You may use your notes to help you. Question 8. What is the main subject of this lecture? Listen to a lecture in an environmental studies class.
Let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to finish up our discussion of alternative energy sources this week. Remember our definition of an alternative energy source? It has to be environmentally friendly, or non-polluting in other words. And what else? Renewable. Not like oil or coal. When you use those, bang, they're gone, they're used up. Renewable sources keep replacing themselves. Okay, so we discussed solar power and wind power one day, and tidal energy, energy from the waves, hydroelectric power from waterfalls, we discussed that too. And in our last class, we talked about one kind of geothermal energy, hydrothermal energy. That's the energy that comes from hot water, from hot springs under the earth. In places like, say, Iceland, parts of New Zealand, where you have these features, this can be a very good source of heat and power. But unfortunately, hot springs aren't found all over the world. Okay, well, there is another source of geothermal power called hot dry rock. That's hot dry rock, or HDR. Ever heard of it? No, eh? Well, the chances are you'll hear a lot about it before long. How does HDR energy work? Well, in theory anyway, and let me stress I say in theory, it's pretty simple. You use oil well drilling equipment, big drills, and you punch 2 holes down into the earth about, maybe 2 miles, 5 kilometers maybe. That's about as far as you can drill into the earth for now at least. Down there, deep in the earth, there is this extremely hot cauldron of rock, of granite. So then, you pump water from the surface into the first tube. The water goes down to the hot rock and becomes superheated. Then, the superheated water rises up the second tube. I forgot to mention that these 2 tubes are interconnected. This hot water rises up the other tube, and you use that to heat up a volatile liquid. Do I need to go into what I mean by that? No. Okay. So then, this volatile liquid turns into a vapor, a gas, and you use it to turn an electrical turbine, and, bingo, you have electricity. And then, when the water has cooled down, you just send it down the first tube again so that you don't waste water. So, does HDR technology meet our criteria for alternative energy? Let's see. Is it environmentally friendly? You bet. There are no toxic gases, no greenhouse emissions, no nuclear wastes. Is it renewable? Sure it is, because the Earth automatically replaces the heat that is used. Here's another possibility. If you built a big HDR facility by the seacoast, you could pump seawater down one tube. The seawater is heated way past boiling, so you could separate water vapor from the salt and other minerals in the seawater. After you used the hot water vapor to generate electricity, you'd have pure, fresh water for thirsty cities nearby, and as a side effect, you have the salt. Now, will this work everywhere? No, conditions have to be just right. You have to have really, really hot granite masses no more than about 5 kilometers below the Earth. We know there are places like this in Australia, in the southwestern United States, in France, a few other places. There are probably a lot of other sites, too, that we are not aware of. In fact, there may be a lot of HDR sites, and who knows how important a source of power this may turn out to be. Right now, engineers are building a small prototype HDR station in southern Australia and one in New Mexico. These could be up and running in a decade or less. Of course, getting started will be expensive. Drilling a hole that far into the ground, building generators, all of that will cost lots of money. But, you know, the way oil prices keep going up, HDR energy production could become more and more financially attractive. Okay, I'm going to hand out a diagram of what one of these prototype HDR facilities looks like, the one in Australia. And then once you've had a chance to take a look at it, we'll talk some more about it.
Now get ready to answer the question. You may use your notes to help you. Question 9. What is the main idea of this lecture?
Lesson 10. Factual, negative factual, and inference questions. Sample Item 1.
Listen to part of a discussion in a business class.
What does a case look like? Well, cases are basically descriptions of let me stress that, of real business situations, chunks of reality from the business world. So you get typically 10 to 20 pages of text that describe the problem, some problem that a real business actually faced. And then there will be another 5 to 10 pages of what are called exhibits.
Exhibits? What are those?
Exhibits, those are documents, statistical documents that explain the situation. They might be, spreadsheets, sales reports, marketing projections, anything like that. But as I said, at the center of every case, at the core of every case, is a problem that you have to solve. So you have to analyze the situation, the data, and sometimes you'll see you don't have enough data to work with, and you might have to collect more, say from the internet. Then you have to make decisions about how to solve these problems.
What does the professor say about exhibits?
Sample Item 2.
Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
So what are conditions like in the taiga? Well, to start with, you've got to understand that it's cold there. I mean, very cold. Summers are short, winters long. So the organisms that call the taiga home have to be well adapted to cold. The trees in the taiga, as I already said, are coniferous trees like the pine, fir, and spruce. And these trees, they've adapted to cold weather. How? Well, for one thing, they never lose their leaves. They're evergreen, right? Always green. So in the spring, they don't have to waste time, don't have to waste energy growing new leaves. They're ready to start photosynthesizing right away. And then, for another thing, these trees are conical, shaped like cones, aren't they? This means that snow doesn't accumulate too much on the branches. It just slides off. And so, well, that means their branches don't break under the weight of the snow. And even their color, that dark, dark green, it's useful because it absorbs the sun's heat.
When discussing needle-leaf trees, which of these adaptations to cold weather does the professor mention?
Sample item 3.
Listen to part of a student presentation in an astronomy class.
Okay, now here's a really strange fact about Venus. It takes Venus only 225 Earth days to go around the Sun, as opposed to the Earth, which of course takes 365 days, what we call a year. But Venus turns around on its axis really slowly. Really slowly. It takes 243 Earth days to spin around completely. The Earth takes, you guessed it, 24 hours. This means that a day on Venus is longer than a year on Venus. In fact, a day on Venus is longer than on any planet in the solar system. Longer even than on those big gas planets like Jupiter. And here's something else weird. All the planets of the solar system turn on their axis in the same direction as they orbit the Sun. All, except Venus, of course. It has what's called a... Wait, let's see. Okay, a retrograde spin.
Which of the following is not true about the length of a day on Venus?
Sample item 4.
Listen to part of a lecture in a biology class.
Lots of the mammals that live in the taiga migrate to warmer climates once cold weather sets in. But there are some year-round residents. Among the predators, the animals that hunt other animals, there are Arctic foxes, wolves, bears, martens, and ermines. There's one thing all these predators have in common. The ones that live there all year round, they all have thick, warm fur coats, don't they? This heavy fur keeps them toasty in the winter. Of course, on the downside, it makes them desirable to hunters and trappers. Some of these predators survive the winter by hibernating, by sleeping right through it. Bears, for example. And some change colors. You've heard of the ermine, right? In the summer, the ermine is dark brown, but in the winter it turns white. That makes it hard to spot, so it can sneak up on its prey. Then, what sorts of herbivores live up there? What do the predators eat to stay alive? There's the moose, of course. But only young moose are at risk of being attacked. The adult moose is the biggest, strongest animal found in the taiga, so a predator would have to be feeling pretty desperate to take on one of these. Mostly predators hunt smaller prey, like snowshoe rabbits, voles, lemmings.
What does the speaker imply about moose?
Exercise 10.1.
Listen to a conversation between two students.
I'm glad we could get together for coffee today, Cindy. You know, it just seems like forever since I've seen you.
I know. It seems I just never see anyone from our freshman dorm days. Ever since I started student teaching, I've been just swamped. I never knew how much work. You know, it always seemed to me that teachers had it pretty easy, short work days, summers off, but I never realized how much work you have to take home. Sometimes I'm grading papers until sometimes until after midnight.
Wow, no wonder we never see you anymore.
Yeah, and since I'm not taking any regular classes, on campus this term, I hardly ever get up here. I seem to be spending my whole life at West Platte Middle School. That's where I'm student teaching.
So, how come you're free today?
Oh, this week is spring break for the middle school, for the whole school district. So I came to campus to talk to my academic advisor.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Our spring break isn't until next week. So, how's it going? With the teaching, I mean. Except for the long hours, are you enjoying it?
Well, let me tell you, at first I thought it was going to be a disaster, a complete disaster. You know, I always saw myself teaching in high school, but there were no student teaching positions open in any of the high schools in the district. I mean, 0, except for one for a German teacher. So that's how I ended up at West Platte. And that wasn't the only problem. You know, I majored in education, but I took lots of classes in physics and chemistry, so I figured they'd put me in a science classroom. But no, the only available classes for me to teach were a couple of math classes.
Wow, so you really didn't get anything you wanted, did you?
As a matter of fact, no. But you know, it's actually turned out okay. For one thing, I had a good background in math, and so really teaching math was no problem, although I'd still rather teach science. But it turns out I like teaching in a middle school. I like it much more than I thought I would. I like working with kids that age. So, guess what? I've decided to look for a job at a middle school instead of at a high school after I graduate.
So, what do you need to talk to your advisor about?
Oh, I need to talk to her about next fall to set up my class schedule for then.
Really? I thought you were all done. I thought you'd finished all your required classes and you were going to graduate when you finished student teaching.
Well, I have finished all my required classes. I have all the coursework I need in education and in science, but I still don't have enough, not quite enough total credits to graduate. So today my advisor and I are going to decide which electives I should take next semester. I'm thinking of maybe taking a literature class. I've always wanted to take a Shakespeare class, but I've never had time.
Oh well, I'm just glad you'll be around next fall. We can get together more often.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you. Question 1. What is Cindy's major? Question 2. What decision about her future has Cindy recently made? Question 3. What was Cindy's main reason for coming to campus today? Question 4. What will Cindy be doing next semester? Listen to a conversation between a student and a visitor to the campus.
Excuse me, but, I'm trying to find my way to the Reynolds building.
The Reynolds building. I'm afraid I don't know where that is.
Really? But I understand that I was told that there was a graduate student exhibit opening today at the Reynolds Art Building.
Oh, now I know where you mean. I was there earlier today, matter of fact. Yeah, I guess the Reynolds Art Building is its official name, but no one on campus calls it that. Everyone just calls it the Art Building.
The Art Building, okay. So, how do I get there?
Well, just go straight ahead, and then first you come to the main library, right? Then you see a walkway leading off to the left. Go that way and walk past the chemistry building.
Wait, I go to the library, I take the walkway to the right.
No, to the left past the chem building. Then you cross a little service road. You just walk a little bit farther and you see the art building, the Reynolds building. You can't miss it because there's a big metal thing on a platform right in front of it.
A thing?
Yeah, there's this big rusty piece of abstract art. I guess you'd call it art. Anyway, it's right in front of the doorway.
A big abstract metal sculpture. Okay, I think I've got it.
I think you'll like the exhibit. Like I said, I dropped by there this morning and took a quick look around because I'm an art major myself and because, well, grad student exhibits are usually great. My favorite pieces, there's this one little room off the main gallery and it's full of sculptures they're all made from neon lights. They're just beautiful the way they glow. I couldn't believe it wasn't the work of some professional artist.
Well, the main reason I'm going is my sister invited me to the opening. She wanted me to see her newest work.
Your sister's an artist?
Yeah, she's a painter. She just started volunteering to teach art to kids. And I think the way her students paint has sort of rubbed off on her. I think her kids have influenced her more than she's influenced them, as a matter of fact. She's using these bright colors and...
Oh, I think I saw her paintings. There was one of a house perched on a hill and another one of a purple lion. I love the colors she uses.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you. Question 5. Why was the woman confused at first when the man asked her for directions? Question 6. According to the woman, what is directly in front of the art building? Question 7. What was the woman's favorite exhibit at the art show? Question 8. What can be inferred from the conversation about the man's sister? Listen to a conversation between two students.
So, Paul, figured out where you're going to live next semester? Are you going to live in the dorm again or off campus?
Well, to tell you the truth,
Because here's the thing. I've leased this big 3-bedroom apartment. It's within walking distance of campus, and I only have one other roommate lined up at the moment. And so I was just wondering if you need a place next semester.
It's nice, really nice of you to think of me, Dave, but I'm not actually going to be living here next fall. I'm not going to need a place to live.
What? You're leaving Rutherford? Are you transferring or...
No, actually, I've decided to take part in a semester abroad program. I'm going to spend the semester in Athens.
Really? You mean you're going to be studying in Greece?
Uh-huh. I'm really excited about it. It's about all I can think of.
But, you don't speak any Greek, do you?
Nope, not a word. But the one and only required course in this program is an intensive language course in modern Greek. So I guess I'll learn some once I get there.
So what made you decide on Greece?
Well, you know, I'm a history major, and eventually I'd like to teach history at the university level. And so I thought I'd like to study history where a lot of it was made. And Professor Carmichael, she's my advisor, she said we'd be visiting a lot of historical sites all over Greece. She really talked up the idea of signing up for this program. Also, I'm interested in theater, and I'll be taking a course in Greek drama, too.
You know, I'll bet it's going to be a real challenge. I mean, it was hard enough for me to find a decent apartment here in town where I've lived for a couple of years. And hey, I speak the language. So I can't even imagine looking for an apartment someplace like Athens and not being able to speak Greek.
Okay, well, there are actually two kinds of semester abroad programs. One is called an independent program. If you sign up for that kind of program, that's the kind of program you're thinking of, probably. And then you have to make your own travel plans, you find your own housing, you make your own arrangements for meals. You're basically on your own except for the academic program. But the other type of program, they call it an island plan.
Why do they call it that?
I don't know. I guess I guess because you're kind of on your own little island even though you're overseas. Anyway, if you go with the island plan, you stay at a dorm with other students from here at Rutherford College, and you eat with them, and the program makes all the airline arrangements, someone meets you at the airport, transportation from the dorm to the school, that's all taken care of. Just about everything is arranged in advance for you. That's the program that's how I decided to go.
Oh, that's the way I'd do it too, if I were going. It just sounds so much easier, and you wouldn't feel so isolated living alone.
Well, in a way, I'd rather be in an independent program. It might be a bit tough, but I think I could handle it. And I think I'd learn more about Greece, and I'd get to meet more local people. There are some programs, in fact, where they place you with a local family. I'd actually love to live with a family, or just out in the community. Plus, it's cheaper to go that way.
So, why are you doing that island program then?
Well, the main reason is time. My reason for going over there is to concentrate on classes, and I think I would spend all my time taking care of, well, just making living arrangements.
So will your teachers all be from Greece?
The Greek language professor is, and some of the other teachers too, but some are from here at Rutherford and from other U.S. universities. Professor Carmichael, my advisor, is going to be teaching over there this year. She's never taught in Greece before, but she taught in a similar program in France a couple years ago.
Well, it sounds great. I wish I could go myself.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you. Question 9. Which of these courses is required for students in the semester abroad program in Greece? Question 10. Which of these is characteristic of the island plan Paul will take part in? Question 11. Why did Paul decide not to take part in the independent plan? Question 12. What does Paul say about Professor Carmichael? Listen to a conversation between two students.
Morning, Steve. Boy, you look exhausted.
Do I? Well, guess that's to be expected. I was up almost all night trying to get ready for my chemistry midterm this morning.
Really? Any idea how you did on it?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Dr. Porter's already posted grades on her office door, and I could have done a whole lot better.
That really surprises me, Steve. You know so much about science.
Yeah, well, it's not surprising to me. I know the material, but for some reason, when it comes to taking tests, I never do well. If a class grade depends on a research paper, I do just fine. But when it comes to taking tests, especially multiple choice tests, I just look at the questions and I draw a blank.
Have you ever considered taking some seminars at the Study Skills Center?
I don't really know anything about it.
Well, the center's run by some grad students and junior professors that help undergraduates, help them get organized, learn some techniques that help them do better in their classes. When I first got here last year, I took a course from them on how to do academic research on the internet, and another one on writing term papers. They were really good, really useful.
So what other kinds of courses do they offer?
Well, I don't know all the courses they offer, but I know they have a class on test-taking skills.
Wow, that's right up my alley.
And I know there's one on how to, manage your time, how to use your time efficiently.
Yeah, well, I guess that's something I need too.
I should tell you, one of the things they're going to tell you is not to stay up all night cramming for a test.
Yeah, I already know it's not a great idea, but I just felt like it was the only way I could get ready.
As a matter of fact, they'll tell you it's the worst thing you can do. You need to be fresh and rested for a test.
Yeah, well, I did drink plenty of coffee to keep me alert. So, anyway, where is the center?
They have a little office in Staunton Hall, across the quadrangle from the physics tower. You know where I mean? That's where you go to sign up. They actually hold their seminars in the main library. I don't know if they're holding any seminars just now, but I think they start new ones every 6 weeks or so.
I should go by there now and try to talk to someone.
You know, if I were you, Steve, I think I'd go by there tomorrow. Right now, you should go back to your dorm and catch up on your sleep.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you. Question 13. Why does Steve look tired? Question 14. How does Steve feel about the grade that he received on the chemistry test? Question 15. Who teaches the seminars at the Study Skills Center? Question 16. Which of the courses at the Study Skills Center will Steve probably be most interested in? Question 17. Where is the Study Skills Center? Question 18. What does the woman suggest Steve do now? Listen to a conversation between a student and a campus housing administrator.
Hi, I'm Jeff Bloom. I'm here to talk to someone about the resident advisor position.
Oh, hi, I'm Frances Delfino. You can talk to me about that. Did you see our ad in the campus paper?
No, Mr. Collingswood down in the off-campus housing office. He suggested I come by and chat with you.
Oh, okay, so...
Let me tell you what's happening with me. I've been living off-campus, living by myself in an apartment, right? Which is great, but my landlord decided to sell the house I'm living in, and the new owner is, well, first she's going to remodel, so I have to move out anyway. Then she's going to rent the apartments for a lot more money. And, well, to make a long story short, I need a place to live just for one more semester.
And you're interested in becoming a resident advisor?
Well, I came by the housing office today to see if, well, the off-campus housing office has a list of apartments available. But everything on the list is too expensive or way too far from campus, or you need to sign a year's lease. There just wasn't anything on the list that interested me, so Mr. Collingswood suggested I come up and see you. He said there were some resident advisor positions open at one of the men's dorms, and that I could get some information about these positions from you.
Fine. Well, I can tell you a little about the RA positions, the resident advisor positions. We do have a couple of openings for grad students or older upperclassmen. If you lived in a dorm yourself, you probably know all about what an RA does.
Well, actually, I never did live in a dorm. I've always lived off campus, so I have no idea.
Well, there's one RA per floor. We have openings in Donahue Hall and Hogan Hall, and you inform students of, university rules, regulations, policies. You organize a few social events for residents. And, there are a lot of other things you may have to do. Help students who are locked out of their rooms. In general, you're a kind of mentor. You help students solve their problems.
That doesn't sound so bad. And, well, my only other option is to share an apartment with a roommate. And I don't think I want to do that.
Well, if you took an RA position, you wouldn't have to share. You'd have your own room, and, in fact, the RA rooms are actually a little larger than the typical resident rooms.
So how much does it pay?
Oh, didn't Mr. Collingswood mention that? There's no salary. It's not exactly a paid position, but your room is free and you're entitled to 10 meals per week at the cafeteria at Donahue Hall.
Really? Well, I guess I'd be saving a lot of money on rent and on meals, but well, here's what I'm most worried about. The noise. I'm just afraid it would be too noisy for me to study, to concentrate. See, like I said, I'm in my last semester here, and I'm taking some pretty tough classes this semester.
Well, I'm not going to lie to you and say that the residents will always be quiet and orderly. I mean, come on, they're undergrads, mostly freshmen. So it will probably be noisier than what you're used to, especially on weekends. But during the week, there are quiet hours from 7 to 10 and then from midnight on. In fact, one of your duties is to make sure these quiet hours stay quiet.
So suppose I decide I want to apply for an RA position. What would I need to do?
I can give you a form to fill out. You'd also need to get 2 letters of recommendation.
Letters? Who from?
Oh, teachers, administrators, someone like that. Oh, also, I have a pamphlet that describes the position in more detail. You can look that over. And I could give you email addresses for a couple of RAs. You could contact them, see how they like the job, see what kinds of experiences they've had.
Now get ready to answer the questions. You may use your notes to help you. Question 19. Why does Jeff have to move out of his apartment? Question 20. How did Jeff find out about the resident advisor position? Question 21. What will Jeff receive if he becomes a resident advisor? Question 22. What does Ms. Delfino suggest Jeff do to get more information about the position?